Hello again, fellow Mystery Files. Today I begin my two-part series ranking all of Agatha Christie's other novels. These are the 21 novels that do not feature either Hercule Poirot or Miss Marple. And this list was a little easier for me to put together as these novels fall very clearly into good or bad with very little in between. As a result, these novels vary significantly in quality when compared to the Poirot or Marple books. Fair warning, there may be spoilers ahead, but as always, I will try to keep the spoilers to a minimum. Let's get started. And this bottom spot was so easy for me to pick. This is Christie's worst book, and I have nothing positive to say about it, and that is Postern of Fate, the final appearance of Tommy and Tuppence. And this is universally looked at as Christie's worst book. It never should have been published. Christie was never diagnosed with dementia or any similar condition, but it is very clear in Posture of Fate that her skills as a writer are severely diminished here. This book makes absolutely no sense. It's a series of ramblings that lead to nowhere. The beginning of this book is just so nonsensical, with Tuppence talking about books and lamps and going to a swap meet that has nothing to do with anything. Both Tuppence and Tommy just talk incessantly about nothing, and even when we get into something plot relevant, they immediately go off on other tangents. The mystery in this book is awful. The Beresfords discovered that a Mary Jordan was murdered like 50 years prior, and this is apparently a matter of national interest, and all of this is so boring. I never cared about it at all. And then there is a present day murder of their gardener who rambles even worse than they do, and he's killed because reasons that are never made clear. The murderer in this book doesn't even show up until like the last 20 or so pages, and we never get any real explanation to even who she is or why she's killing people or why she cared about Mary Jordan. It's all a mess. And the worst part is that Christie can't even keep names and places straight. The house Tommy and Tuppence live in has like six different names. The only positive I can give this novel is that it is a Tommy and Tuppence book. We only have four of them, and I always loved them as characters. I think they're very underrated in the grand scheme of Christie's works. Albert is also in this book, and he's a fun presence as always. He's really the only good thing in this book, so I have to put Postner of Fate here in last place at number 21. Now, the next eight novels on this list are all thrillers, and pretty lackluster ones at that, though to varying degree. It's not that I don't like thriller novels, I do, but I don't think Christie does thriller books particularly well. I only really like two of her thrillers, and they will be in the next video, and I'll go through these next few books pretty quickly because I don't have that much to say about them. These next three thrillers in particular I find really atrocious. The worst of these, and this was a bit of a contest, is here at number 20, and that is Passenger to Frankfurt. And I had a serious debate about putting this novel even below Postern of Fate because at least that book has Tommy and Tuppence to get me through it. But I did decide to put it above that one because at least Passenger to Frankfurt makes some sense. It's not entirely coherent, but at least I understand what the characters are up to a majority of the time. There are just a lot of random scenes in this book that don't make any sense, and at times it goes off the rails. Sir Stafford Nye just lets a random woman he just met drug him in the middle of an airport, and then he tracks her down for some reason. We have a really bizarre sequence with a bunch of people in a mental asylum who all think they're Hitler. And this is kind of funny, but not really in a good way. And by that time that happens, the reader is likely just skimming through this book waiting for it to end. So I put Passenger to Frankfurt here at number 20. Now, for number 19, I have another thriller that is very much the same, and that is They Came to Baghdad. This has more of a spy element to it than a straight up thriller, and it is extremely boring. It slogs from start to finish. Victoria Jones is one of the most insufferable heroines in any novel, not just Christie novels, I mean, like any novel. I didn't care what happened to her, and she's not even really the person who figures things out at the end. It's so hard to take this book seriously. The most interesting character to me is Anna Shiel, and unfortunately, she's barely even appears. I don't understand why Christie didn't make her the heroine of this book. Christie typically has overtly political messaging in her thrillers, and this is probably her worst example of that, where the villains are trying to prevent peace and create a new heaven and earth, and this is all just a little much and not really presented in a sophisticated manner or even one that's palatable to a lot of people, even though the underlying sentiment is sort of a very common one. So I had to put They Came to Baghdad here at number 19. At number 18, I have the final thriller that I think is largely without merit, and that is Destination Unknown. The reason why I have Unknown above these other two is because I think at least Hilary Craven slash Olive Betterton is a much more interesting character than any that appear in those previous books. She's a young mother who's lost her child and her husband ran off. She's thinking about ending her life when she's recruited for a dangerous mission. She's a good candidate because she doesn't really care about her life. After that, we're in typical Christie thriller territory with a lot of bizarre shenanigans going on, like traveling to a leper colony and Hillary pretending to be a wife of a famous scientist. I think the ending, while having its issues, where the big bad is really just using the political intrigue for financial gain, is a very good twist and very salient even today. So I put Destination Unknown above those other titles here at number 18. At number 17, and we're finally out of the very worst thrillers, but we have another thriller here that I also think has a lot of issues, but at least it's humorous, and that is The Secret of Chimneys. And this is the first appearance of Superintendent Battle, who is one of the blander major recurring characters. I always found him to be just fine. Secret of Chimneys introduces us to the fictional country of Slovakia for the first time, which is mentioned on occasion in other books. I find a lot of the hijinksy stuff in this book to be just really ridiculous, but also quite humorous, where I think this book is at least much more enjoyable than the ones I previously talked about, and also potentially even the next few on this list. But I do think the quality isn't as high as the next couple of books. This book has so many impersonations that really seem to be the very easy way out of things. We have a jewel heist where the Koh Noor is stolen and replaced with a fake. There's a lot of really strange royalty nonsense, which, to be fair, is loosely based on real events and other fictional stories. I do enjoy The Secret of Chimneys, however, it is a fun romp, but I really can't take it that seriously, nor do I think the plot is amongst the best of the thrillers, so I have it here at number 17. Moving on to number 16, I have the first thriller that I would consider pretty good, but it is still flawed and nowhere near Christie's best work, and that is The Man in the Brown Suit. What makes this novel better than the previous thrillers is the heroine Anne Bedingfield. She is one of the only, if not the only, female heroine in a thriller novel by Christie, besides Tuppence, of course, who really holds her own in a novel. She's this down and out young woman who is bored with life, very much like Hilary Craven, but unlike Hillary, she is the one charting her own future. She witnesses a man being murdered at the tube station and decides to search for the mysterious man in the brown suit. Her adventure is a very interesting one where she risks everything she has to buy a ticket aboard the ship called the Kilmorden Castle. She really is jumping into the unknown, and Christie writes this in such a way that we are interested in her. The Man in the Brown Suit still contains a lot of those Christie thriller tropes like jewel thieves and all that, but they're toned down considerably to make them more believable without sacrificing that hijinksy fun we are accustomed to. The reason why I have it at number 16 is because it fits perfectly as a bridge amongst all these thrillers, whereas the previous thrillers had very little, if any, focus on a murder plot. The future thrillers have a great deal of focus on the murder mystery as well as the thriller elements. The Man in the Brown Suit is somewhere in between that, so I placed it here at number 16. Now, these next three novels are all what I would consider the better thrillers. They contain significant murder mystery plot and a thriller plot, both of which are at least intriguing. And at number 15, I have the least of these three, in my opinion, and that is Why Didn't They Ask Evans? And I'm going to be honest, I think this book is this high because I enjoyed the recent adaptation of the novel that gave me a new appreciation for it. I do find the book to be a bit of a slog to get through at times, but not nearly as so as something like Passenger to Frankfurt. But I think the characters are the best in any thriller I've talked about so far. Bobby, Frankie, and even Badger are all quite humorous, and I love the way they sort of bumble around the mystery. I do wish they were a little smarter and better at the detection game, however. As for the murder plot, I enjoy it, but there are some issues. The biggest issue is that we have a dying victim uttering cryptic clues again, and this always bothers me. And this one is particularly cryptic, where the victim's last words are the title, Why Didn't They Ask Evans? And much of the novel is focused on who Evans is and what wasn't asked of them. Evans turns out to be a parlor maid at Bobby's house, of all places, which I do find hilarious. But what wasn't asked of her was why she wasn't asked to witness a will, and this is extremely obscure. Like, why is this man's dying words instead of who killed him or what the will was? It's so strange, and it doesn't take away anything from this book necessarily, but I still have problems with it. So I put Why Didn't They Ask Evans here at number 15. At number 14, I have the highest ranked thriller novel that does not feature Tommy and Tuppence, and that is the sequel to The Secret of Chimneys, The Seven Dials Mystery. And I actually do like this book a lot, but for me, I just don't care about the returning characters like Bundle Brent and Bill Eversley. I don't find them interesting, nor am I invested in their romance. However, I do enjoy the story a lot. There are a lot of little clever things that do it for me. I like the mystery surrounding the Seven Dials organization where we are really misled not only about the motive of the Seven Dials Club, but also who is a hero and who is a villain. And this is turned around on us a lot. I think the murders in this book are actually solvable with the clues given, which isn't really the case in these previous thrillers. But this book has some flaws, and it has the same flaws that other Christie novels typically have. There's just a lot of unbelievable shenanigans, like a secret society and a theft of a scientific discovery and things like that. We have Superintendent Battle parading around with a hood with a clock on it over his head, but it's not so much a problem here, as these things are much more grounded in reality than they tend to be. So I put the Seven Dials mystery above most of these other thrillers here at number 14. Now, for number 13, I have the final thriller in this bottom half of the list, and that is By the Pricking of My Thumbs. And I didn't quite know where to place this one because this book is really a tale of two stories. The first third of this book is fantastic, where we go with Tommy and Tuppence to the nursing home to visit Aunt Ada, and we meet Mrs. Lancaster. Mrs. Lancaster is an all-time great Christie character. Her stories about dead children in the fireplace and the way she looks at Tuppence are so creepy and spine-chilling. It's like nothing else in a Christie novel. However, once Mrs. Lancaster disappears and Aunt Ada dies, we move into the next section of the book and it goes really off the rails. Tuppence goes on this ridiculous hunt to locate a house and a painting Aunt Ada had, and she stumbles across some kind of bizarre crime spree in a country village. It's not made clear immediately what's going on, and we have stolen jewels again, and we meet some strange characters who don't really contribute much to the story. It does pick up again when Tuppence gets hit on the head, which is hilarious to me because it's usually Tommy who gets hit on the head, and there is a lot of fun dialogue surrounding this. But then it goes back off the rails again, and we meet very important characters very late into the novel, and the ending is just completely ridiculous, where Mrs. Lancaster attacks Tuppence in a psychotic breakdown, like she's some kind of James Bond villain. I'm also not a fan of her motivation for killing the children, where she's taking away other people's children to make friends with her baby she aborted. This is all really bizarre and doesn't particularly age well. I decided to put By the Pricking of My Thumbs with these other novels because it does have these thriller-like components to it, and it's just not up to the quality of Christie's other Tommy and Tuppence stories or the other standalone mystery novels, so I have it here at number 13. At number 12 is the lowest ranked traditional mystery novel that is a standalone, and that is The Sitterford Mystery. And I love The Sitterford Mystery. I think it's an underrated gem, but the reason why it is last amongst these traditional mysteries is because this is a rare Christie novel that does not play fair. We are told that Emily Trefusis finds a pair of boots in a fireplace at Captain Trevelyan's house, but we aren't told until after the reveal that these boots are ski boots. And this is a key piece of information that is withheld from us. Had this not been the case, I would have had the Sitterford mystery at least number 10. However, there's still so much to enjoy about this book. I love the way Christie uses the supernatural in this book, where she never uses the supernatural as part of a mystery. It's always human work. But the way the supernatural can influence a person's mind and misread others, we get a classic 1920s mystery trope of a parlor game. Here it is a seance and a Ouija board, but there are some great characters in this book as well. Emily Trefusis is one of Christie's best plucky young heroines. The mystery itself, while a little simple, has great misdirection. There's a great clue early on when we learn that Captain Trevelyan likes to enter mail in sports contests, but uses his neighbor's addresses because he believes his house is too grand to be selected for a winner. But then much later on in the book, Major Burnaby receives a check winning the contest. And I remember the first time I read this book and reading this scene and thinking, huh, that check must be Captain Trevelyan's because he enters the contest using other people's addresses. And then I never made the connection that Major Burnaby killed him so he could keep that check. It was right there in front of me the whole time, and I missed it. I do have some other issues with this book, though, mainly the sheer number of characters and side plots. There are way too many of both. I like all the characters and the side plots, but they are just so plentiful. It gets a little chaotic and messy at times. It does seem the actual motive for murder isn't the kind you can make a whole novel out of, so Christie does have to do some padding here. But overall, The Sitter Mystery is a great read, very fun, and a clever mystery, so it comes in here at number 12. Now, for this video's final novel at number 11 is another book that starts off great, but just goes completely bonkers at the end, and that is Murder is Easy. Like I said, I think this has a wonderful beginning and a wonderful concept. The opening scene with Mrs. Fullerton and Luke Fitzwilliam on the train, where she tells them of all the people in her village who were murdered and that Dr. Humblebee will be next, is fantastic. I really like these young male heroes who get involved with murders more for their own curiosity than anything else, which is exactly what Luke does when he learns that both Lavinia Fullerton and Dr. Humblebee have died. This is another Christie that involved the supernatural, in particular local village folklore. I don't think she uses it as well here than she does in the Sittaford mystery, because in Murder is Easy, it's a very clear red herring. However, I think the idea that Lord Whitfield has this godlike complex is very fascinating. Everyone who harmed Lord Whitfield winds up dead, which makes him a very good scapegoat, and it does seem this is a case of incriminating the guilty party, but only it doesn't turn out to be that way. There are a lot of murders in this book, which I think is where it starts to go off the rails. A few of these deaths occur before the book, so we learn about them passively. By my count, there are at least 7 murders in this book, and none of them really go into the fine details we expect from a Christie murder mystery. I think the sheer number of them was probably too much that none of them get the attention they deserve. I also feel a lot of the characters aren't too well developed. They mostly seem very generic and aren't given the page time to be the suspects they're supposed to be. The obvious exception to this is Honoria Wainfleet, who is the killer, and I don't appreciate that Christie created this killer who has serious mental health issues. I don't think traditional mystery novels should have maniacal killers. It leaves a bad taste in my mouth. I also think the ending of this book is just completely bonkers, with Miss Wainfleet chasing Bridget through the woods. And I also have some logistical questions with the way she commits some of these murders, specifically the way she kills Mrs. Fullerton. I think it's just totally unbelievable, where she pushes her in front of a car with in a crowd of people, and she just gives someone Lord Whitfield's license plate number and just walks away, and nobody thinks this is suspicious. And I didn't even mention Superintendent Battle yet, who only makes barely a cameo appearance in this book, which is disappointing. But this is an enjoyable read for the most part, so I have Murder is Easy here at number 11. And that's it for today. Next week, I will continue this list with the top 10 standalone slash Tommy and Tuppence slash Superintendent Battle slash Colonel Race novels. This will also be my final ranking of Christie novels before I move on to another author, but I will return to make other videos about Christie and her novels. So until next time, Mystery Files.